Hey guys, this is Mikro. There has been an announcement for Season 2 that is going to be coming out shortly on the PTR, and I wanted to give off some first impressions for it from both a general game point of view and from a little bit of a PvP perspective, because there's also some patch notes that got released with this. From the general game perspective, there's going to be a new Elite trial with the Sandworm. I am pretty sure all of the Beast Ward and Beast Bane craft mods are already been bought out. So that's going to be kind of fun to gear up for without finding those in the market, or they're going to be at a much higher price. But that's a thing that's coming out, which is really cool. They got some new story stuff, which honestly, in my opinion, is kind of one time, one use stuff. It's not really that impactful to the game as a whole, but that's coming out, which is always good. New 3v3 map. From the screenshots that were shown of the 3v3 map, it looks like it will have a decent amount of high ground. It's kind of a gladiator style with two levels, which inherently will make it a bit weaker for melee and stronger for more ranged players. So I imagine it's going to be a more ranged favoring map, and believe what they have said in the past is they're going to favor this new map, and then eventually they're going to have both in kind of a pool where you rotate between the two. But in the meantime, it's just going to be this new 3v3 map, but at least that will be interesting. The season pass also has transmog. The transmog looks like you have to pay for stuff, so guessing they're going to be taking after like kind of a Destiny model or Wizard 101 kind of model where you have to pay for basically to get the skins. But sounds like what you do is you pay for the skin and then it becomes like a permanent skin for all your characters to use, and that skin is like the stuff that you have on, and you can use that in any gear loadout, right? So that's kind of cool. Seems like an honestly a pretty cool idea and sounds like it could be good. I don't think everyone's super happy that you're probably gonna have to pay for the majority of it. It just kind of depends on how big that threshold is. Is it like if it's like $5 per skin, like I don't think people are gonna really go for that. That's just kind of outrageous. But if it's like $1 for a skin kind of thing, then like it's like maybe. And given that the game has a base price, it kind of makes sense why they're kind of charging for extra features at this point. But still kind of a little disappointing. You would think that they would try to bank off of something like or something else that wasn't just quality of life, and then the quality of life stuff would just be kind of a given because it probably should have been in the game in the get go. But that's kind of my own opinion on that. Take that as you will, though. The transmog's coming, and that's going to be really, really cool to fight people with their custom uh, designs and whatnot from gear that you can find in the world, which is honestly a lot cooler than some of the skins that we have. The Elite Trial is coming out. This is for 20 people. It's supposed to be for max level players. The gear score increase is not coming, so guessing you want to be 625 with full Beast Bane, Beast Ward. See how good the rewards are. I think the interesting part to this is if this gives something like shards, this could be like the end all PvE game mode for getting something like shards. I'm not sure what else they could give for it to really be worth it, but if it's something like you could run this 5 times a week and you get like 10k shards per completion or something like that, then maybe there's a world where you don't necessarily have to do mutateds anymore and you can start doing this, but I haven't fully read into this yet. That's just like my initial kind of reaction to it, but this seems like it will be really fun. There's the seasonal stuff, so that's just kind of going through the season pass. This is gonna probably give rewards like at the end of it, you'll get your tokens to unlock skins and whatnot. But that model is staying put through. They're doing raid groups, so that's like 20 people be able to communicate, coordinate, whatever. So that would be cool if they could expand out to open world and whatnot. But for now, it's gonna sounds like it's gonna be limited towards the raid in particular, so you don't have to like all be coordinated in a Discord call. It's all gonna be in game, which makes sense. There's Crossroad OPR, which in theory sounds good. I think the best part about this is honestly the queue times are going to go down, but between every world and every server, it feels like that that's just the same people no matter what server you go to. It's like pretty similar at this point because everyone has characters on multiple servers. But I think the biggest part is when you queue, you won't be stuck in like a 10 to 20 minute queue randomly and then get in the OPR queue. Where if you feel pressured that if you don't queue right away, you're just gonna miss that queue and you're gonna be stuck waiting 10 to 20 minutes again. You're gonna be like able to kind of hop in those sooner, and it would be like maybe a 3 to 5 minute wait versus like a 10 to 20. So I think that's just generally a good thing. It's kind of needed. They have some OPR adjustments.
Outpost Rush will receive adjustments to make the gameplay more engaging. Updates include reduced wait times, which is because you're going to do multiple servers. Increased focus on objectives. I imagine this is going to be from scoring. Uh, I imagine that's just kind of the only thing that they can do there. And then increased damage from siege weapons. So this is like basically encouraging PvE style gameplay to be even more potent in OPR, which is interesting, but that's also the thing that people I think generally dislike the most about OPR right now is when you have like a PvEer that's kind of on top of their game. They get the base up, they get the stuff that buffs your entire team up with the camp kind of thing, or the camp that buffs your damage and your absorption, and then they start repairing gates. Like that's just one of the most tilting things that can happen, and I think that's going to be encouraged further. So from a solo carry perspective, that's a really good thing. There's still that avenue for solo carrying, but in general, it doesn't feel super interactive, and it feels just overpowered in general. So I wouldn't say it's like a super big bonus. I guess one other thing that's kind of useful to counter that is if you get like a minion to help break down the door, that can really speed it up a lot. So like going to farm the brute in the mine before you kind of head over and then placing that down can help a lot. Or getting something like a bear, but that's more. But if you have like a big team, it's not really going to make a big difference, and someone can easily out repair the damage you put into the door for like 1 to 2 minutes straight. So it's still not ideal, but that's going to be coming. So OPR might be a little bit more tolerable. To be honest, I think the biggest thing that they could add is like some sort of cover between B and A and B and C. If they were able to do that, that would make OPR feel a lot better than me. But I don't think they're going to be doing that. Or from like the spawn point where there's a big open area, like that's the part from OPR that I think is the most tilting is when you get pelted by range and you can't really do anything about it. First light, they're kind of redoing the zone. You could already kind of see it where you can't really go through the zone in the first place right now, where there's no real point to. So this is all being kind of changed to be like a new seasonal area that they've kind of alluded to in the past. So that will be kind of interesting, but it's not like a territory that's going to have a fight for that objective anymore. So we're going to be producing them out of areas for factions. So there's going to be, I think, 11 towns again versus 12 that's right now. So that's going to be a little bit different, but that's what they're doing to kind of transform the zone. And I think they were doing some other ideas with that as well. So that's the big thing. And then there's this new Heart Rune ability, the Devour, summon a sand worm to burst on the ground and damage anything within its path. They haven't like released the different types of it, but that's the idea behind it. Uh, it sounds like it's kind of like a channel thing where it's like kind of hits people kind of in a line. Moreover, since it's hitting people in the path that you're kind of summoning it to hit. So could be good, could not be good. Don't really know yet. We'll kind of know in 2 days once it hits the PTR how it feels. The summer Medley Fair event is coming back, so basically, refreshing gear is going to be really easy to get again. So Brazil Ellie version refreshing should be best in slot for current meta for most builds, and that's going to be super cheap to roll with this event. So look forward to that. That's going to be really awesome to have access to that like kind of free-ish bis for a lot of sets. And you can roll those without having to level up your entire armory too, which is just a big plus. There's the Siege of Sulfur thing, so it's like a new group activity that you can kind of fight a mob for and get some rewards for it as well. I don't know how good those rewards will be yet. We'll kind of know once the PTR comes out. PTR is coming out in 2 days, so that will be that that will be the interesting part when that actually comes out. Now, getting on to the more interesting part for probably all of you guys, let's talk about the PvP changes. So there's like some kind of bug fixes in here, but they're really impactful. So they have random lore things. We don't really care about that, but the PvP perks. So invigorated punishment was only supposed to apply to abilities, and before it was applying to everything. So it was applying to ultimates, it was applying to basic attacks, and it was applying to abilities. Now it's just going to apply to abilities. Does that mean it's a bad thing to run? No, it's probably still the best thing to actually run, uh, minus like some very niche circumstances where like maybe say you're in heavy and you're debating between hardy, keen and invig or hardy, keen and slash. Like that maybe there's a debate there to go slash for certain people. But I think in general, Invig is still the thing that you're going to want to go because it applies to all kind of uh, it's going to apply to all abilities rather than everything else. So it won't apply to detonate, but abilities are still generally your biggest form of burst in most clumps. So if you actually like look at like how that's going to affect people, it won't really affect that much. It just means that there's kind of a general damage nerf across the board incoming from ability based builds. So you could think of like Bruiser, Great Axe Warhammer, they have a very ability based nuke, and that is going to get nerfed a lot because of this change. You're going to be looking at based off like what invigorated punishment does. Like this is I'm doing this backwards, aren't I? So you could be looking at something like a 14% increase in your effective HP once that's nerfed. So that's going to be really, really cool. It could be a little bit less than this as well, but generally everything is going to feel tankier from this change, which is kind of nice because it feels like a lot of clumps right now just kind of get blown up instantly. There are some heart rune changes. Dark Ascent got an iframe built into it. Is 15 frames of iframe good enough for it to be good? There's probably an argument now that if you're like a Daddy point player and you're getting consistently nuked on, there's an argument to go Dark Ascent. In terms of like what kinds of Dark Ascent are actually good, I don't think there's really a super great kind. You probably like they all have leeching on them. There's one that gives you Fortify, which I guess is probably the one that you'd want if you're on point. There's one that does extra damage, so then you'll heal more from the extra damage. You probably don't need that. But so you're probably looking at either going crippling or you're looking at fortifying ascent if you're considering going ascent. It really just depends how big 15 frames feel, because I don't know how much 15 frames actually is. It's probably like about the same thing as a dodge, but there's going to be a small iframe in there while the player. So, and the iframe is going to be while the Dark Ascent startup while the player is rising into the air. So it's like it could be good, but the problem with Dark Ascent too is like when you land, it's super super vulnerable to be getting screamed, to be getting kind of CC'd in general, and it's super telegraphed because you can only come down on like one spot. You can choose like when to actually come down, which is kind of nice, I believe, but I don't see Dark Ascent really being meta. It could be a niche thing that is techable on point, but that is like the only case. And then the really big one is they changed detonate. So they increased the self rend from being 15 to 30%. You've seen this a lot with changes, like they did this with the Void Gauntlet where they doubled the value because of the new changes. If you we could start looking at the math there and seeing how that actually affects things from what it was originally, where you had originally a 15% rend that was put upon you, you're at 80 6.96 effective HP for like most of these classes. And then if you go to what the changes were before, this got moved to the new Fortify, which means that you basically have half the actual effectiveness of that. So like you take the difference here, like 100 minus 89.6, and then divide that by 2. And this is going to be like basically the value that you're going to get from between the difference here. And then what they're doing is they're doubling that. So then we go to minus 30, and we're basically in line with what it was before. You have a slight buff to detonate if you're in light compared to what it was originally, a slight nerf if you are in medium compared to what it was originally, and then uh or sorry, a slight buff if you were in medium, but it's not much of a buff, it's basically the same, and then heavy, a slight nerf compared to what it was originally. So not like the big thing there is detonate actually is gonna hurt you if you use it, and you have to like kind of have to have a reason to justify it now. So if you go for a detonate, you can't really expect not to die. You're probably in a spot where you're going to be taking more damage, so you could die during it. So it's like kind of a thing where you probably don't want to match detonates when the other team is going for it. Do I see people going for like stone form or anything like that over detonate? I don't really see it. Stone form, they haven't updated the values of it. If they doubled all the values for stone form, I think people would probably consider going for the exploding stone form again, for the reason that it gives you grit, which is nice, and then grit will increase the amount of damage that you do with your actual combo. And then people have like a conversation maybe where it's like, hey, is there ever a world where I drop 300 con, I play for the stone form to give myself grit when I go for my combo, and then I increase my damage overall? I think that's like kind of interesting, but I don't think people are really gonna do that. they need to like kind of encourage Stoneform a little bit more for that to be valued. I think in general, if they were just to double all the perks effectiveness that gave Fortify, and then also double all the ones that gave Ren, that would kind of put them in line with the other changes, but it would make it weaker on light, and it would make it a little bit more impactful on heavy. And I think that's a pretty balanced spot. But right now they're doing it selectively, so it's kind of hard to judge where this will put everything. But I would say even with these changes, the idea that you would drop invigorated punishment and then you would drop your detonate is kind of wrong. I think people are still going to go for invigorated punishment. I think people are still going to go for detonate. There's not a big reason to change off of that unless the new heart rune is just kind of game shaping. But from the sound of it, where you kind of summon a sandworm in a line to do damage, like I don't see that being super impactful. And this is probably going to be something that drops from the raid itself. But we will see when that PTR patch goes out, guys. What do you guys think about the changes? I don't think this is going to change the meta a lot, but let me know if you disagree and what other interactions you may have discovered off of this. And I'll see you guys in the next video.